Heads up, next week's video is already out, waiting to be watched over on Nebula. Stay tuned for more details. Sherlock Holmes is an icon, an eternal character who we all know and love. More a symbol to most of us than a person. He is a brain, a logical reasoning machine, a man who's dedicated himself more fully to his life's work than almost any other. He lives to unravel puzzles, plots, conundrums, intrigues. He sniffs out the diamond thief. He deciphers the sinister message written in a code of dancing stick figures. He foils the elaborate plans of the thieves tunneling into the bank right under the noses of the police. More than once, he outsmarts the cunning schemes of his own would-be assassins. "I am a brain, Watson," he says to his friend. "The rest of me is mere appendix." Even his creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, said in an 1892 interview, "Sherlock Holmes is utterly inhuman. No heart, but with a beautifully logical intellect." But after wearing down my own Holmes collection to a stack of dog ears, rounded corners, and yellowed pages, I have to wonder, is that really true? Is Sherlock Holmes really just a brain? Was it really only the beauty of his pure logical intellect that made Holmes one of the most enduring characters of the last century? Is it his unchanging, static, familiar nature that makes us love him so much? I'm not so sure. I know him too well at this point to just accept that idea. I can't help but think there's something else here. Another, deeper mystery. Perhaps the longest-running, most important, most interesting question in all of Sherlock Holmes's adventures is something a bit less spectacular. Maybe it isn't the ominous puzzle of the Hound of the Baskervilles, or the search for the scandalous photo of the King of Bohemia, or the race against the malevolent schemes of his greatest opponent, the criminal mastermind Moriarty. Maybe Holmes's greatest mystery is himself. The mystery of this man who is only a brain, of the life that is mere appendix. The mystery of character, and how much of it lies within us, the readers. Did you know that we make more than YouTube videos? It's true. We actually make an entire second show called Worldsmiths. We talk a lot about art on this channel, but Worldsmiths is where we peel back the pages and enter the worlds of the artists themselves, their influences, their methods, their lives. In fact, just earlier today, we released a video about Arthur Conan Doyle, the author behind Sherlock Holmes. It'll honestly give a lot of context on this video that you're watching right now. You can also see next week's Foundry video on Nebula right now. It's already up, waiting to be watched. No need to wait a whole nother week. Sign up for the Curiosity Stream Nebula bundle deal for just $14.79 a year, that's less than $125 a month, and get more Foundry than you've ever had before. Visit curiositystream.com/TaleFoundry and use code TaleFoundry to get started. Watson's first impression of Holmes really forms the foundation for everyone's impression of the character. "How are you?" he said, gripping my hand with a strength for which I should have hardly given him credit. "You've been in Afghanistan, I perceive?" "How on earth did you know that?" I asked in astonishment. Holmes chuckled. His powers of deduction are clear right from the start. It's the first thing we know about him, and the most obvious thing about him forever after. Over the years, Watson comes to know Holmes as a man of habits, narrow and concentrated habits. Chances are, if it isn't somehow related to the art of detection, he isn't concerned with it. In fact, Holmes himself is known to refer to anything outside his occupation as mere extras, appendixes, trivialities. "You see," he explains, "I consider that a man's brain is originally like a little empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in all the lumber of every sort he comes across. A skillful workman is very careful indeed. It is a mistake to think that that little room has elastic walls and can distend to any extent. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useful facts elbowing out the useful ones." To Watson, and I'm sure to every reader in the audience, the revelation of how little Holmes knows outside his incredible skill set was at least as profound as the discovery of his expertise. What a shock to learn that Holmes, the inimitable sleuth, one of the cleverest characters in all fiction, doesn't even know that the Earth travels around the sun. "What the deuce is it to me?" says Holmes. You say that we go round the sun. If we went round the moon, it would not make a pennyworth of difference to me or my work. And it's not just information Holmes sees this way. Emotional attachments and all forms of society are also just extras to Holmes. The emotional qualities are antagonistic to clear reasoning, he says. In Watson's words, grit in a sensitive instrument or a crack in one of his high-power lenses would not be more disturbing than a strong emotion in a nature such as his. And I suppose, somewhat predictably following all of that, he's especially averse to the grand emotion of love. You really are an automaton, a calculating machine, Watson cries one day at his flatmate, flabbergasted by Holmes's indifference to a visit from the most charming young lady he'd ever seen. There is something positively inhuman in you at times. According to Holmes, he is his mind, and his mind is detective work. I am a brain, Watson. The rest of me is mere appendix. Honestly, that's kind of what he looks like to the casual reader. That's what I thought of him at first. That's what I thought of him before I ever picked up one of his stories. Through second-hand impressions and pop culture osmosis, I know Holmes as the brain, the icon, the paragon of all genius detective characters. I went into page 1 expecting a plot-driven adventure about a two-dimensional, simple, monolithic character with a single face. But as I made my way through the stories, I began to recognize a subtle force driving me forward, something distinct from all the individual mystery plots, that deeper mystery I mentioned at the video's start. I was drawn in, and rather than getting stale, it was getting more and more fun the further I went. I very quickly began to realize that Holmes cannot just be a brain. He is a brain, but there's too much nuance there, too much depth, too much complexity. He was rapidly becoming more than this archetypal greatest detective. Without ever changing, going through a character revelation or arc, he was evolving before my very eyes. Although Holmes declares no room in his mental attic for useless pursuits, he makes a striking exception for the violin. Oftentimes, Watson hears him scraping away with the instrument on his knee, lost in thought. He recalls once seeing Holmes in a concert hall, wrapped in the most perfect happiness, gently waving his long, thin fingers in time to the music. His gently smiling face and his languid, dreamy eyes were as unlike those of Holmes the sleuth-hound, Holmes the relentless, keen-witted, ready-handed criminal agent, as it was possible to conceive. Despite his proclamation of strict indifference to anything outside his field of work, Holmes clearly has a flair for the artistic, the dramatic, and the performative. According to Watson, Holmes is as sensitive to flattery on the score of his art as any girl could be of her beauty. At times when his friends applaud a particularly brilliant deduction or solution, he even blushes and gives a bow, like the master dramatist who receives the homage of his audience. It was at such moments that for an instant he ceased to be a reasoning machine and betrayed his human love for admiration and applause. And that's not the only place we see him making a little extra room in his carefully arranged mental attic. At times, Holmes has been known to take the law into his own hands. Yes, he's largely on the side of the police, but his sense of right and wrong is less a matter of law and more like a code of chivalry. He's kept secrets that would have served as really good evidence just to protect the reputation and happiness of the families involved in the crimes he's investigated. He's allowed criminals to walk free when he believed that the expected punishment was undeserved. More than once, he stepped outside the bounds of what would strictly be considered legal. "Where's your warrant?" asks the man Holmes suspects of kidnapping. Holmes half draws a revolver from his pocket. "This will have to serve till a better one comes." "Why, you're a common burglar." "So you might describe me," says Holmes cheerfully. "My companion is also a dangerous ruffian, and together we are going through your house." So despite his buttoned-up psyche, the selective space of his mind, we know he's a bit of a thespian, and we know he's a bit of a rogue. But, more shocking than either of these, he's also, according to Watson, the very worst tenant in London. Although in his methods of thought he was the neatest and most methodical of mankind, he was nonetheless in his personal habits one of the most untidy men that ever drove a fellow lodger to distraction. Holmes keeps his cigars in the coal settle, his tobacco at the toe end of a Persian slipper, and his unanswered correspondence transfixed by a jackknife into the very center of his wooden mantelpiece. He plays music at strange hours, conducts malodorous scientific experiments. He even, to Watson's grief, decorates the wall opposite his armchair with an array of aesthetic bullet pocks. It's not just his home he's untidy with either. It's his habits, his health, his social life. All of these things exist in a shocking state of disarray. He's a cocaine addict. He operates at a hyperactive pace, punctuated by periods of catatonic laziness. He's possessed of a certain insensitivity and a sardonic lack of patience with any intellect lesser than his own, which is most of them. In one story, he remarks to Watson, "I cannot at the moment recall any possible blunder which you have omitted." Even with all of that, perhaps the most telling thing of all is that he has friends at all. Watson and the long-suffering landlady, Mrs. Hudson, do genuinely love him, and they're among those who mourn his death in the fatal confrontation with Moriarty at the Reichenbach Falls. They're also the ones who rejoice upon his miraculous return. They see, just as the reader comes to see, that Holmes is more than just a brain, that there is something within him beyond his work, beyond the archetype we all know, that is worthy of admiration and love. Make no mistake, Holmes is everything he claims. He is a brain. He is an automaton. He is narrow and mechanical and calculating. But I'm not convinced that those are the things which have entrenched him in our minds and our hearts as readers. I'm not sure that his status as world's greatest detective is what makes you read all 4 novels and all 58 short stories. I think the mystery of Holmes is the human being that lurks beneath those things, and it's our task as readers to detect and uncover it. Holmes himself, who scoffs at all things of the heart, would probably mock this sentiment. However, there is a single moment late in the series where he reveals himself as a definite hypocrite. He and Watson have cornered their suspect. The infamous criminal, Killer Evans, stands at the end of their pistols, trapped. Then, suddenly, Evans fires off 2 shots, one grazing Watson's leg. "I felt a sudden hot sear as if a red iron had been pressed to my thigh," recounts Watson. "There was a crash as Holmes's pistol came down on the man's head. Then my friend's wiry arms were round me, and he was leading me to a chair." "You're not hurt, Watson? For God's sake, say that you're not hurt." "It was worth a wound. It was worth many wounds, to know the depth of loyalty and love which lay behind that cold mask. The clear, hard eyes were dimmed for a moment, and the firm lips were shaking. For the one and only time, I caught a glimpse of a great heart, as well as of a great brain. All my years of humble but single-minded service had culminated in that moment of revelation. It's nothing, Holmes. A mere scratch." A glimpse of a great heart as well as a great brain. When I first read that, I myself felt like a patient detective whose long-abiding suspicion had finally been confirmed by hard evidence. "Aha," I thought to myself, "I've got you, Holmes. You do have a heart. You are more than a brain." For one time and one time only, we see that last piece of Holmes's puzzle revealed. The true depth of his capability for loyalty, feeling, and love. We see the man behind the icon, the brain, and the heart. "What a lovely thing a rose is," Sherlock Holmes once said in a poetic mood. "Our highest assurance of the goodness of Providence seems to me to rest in flowers. All other things, our powers, our desires, our food, are all really necessary for our existence in the first instance. But this rose is an extra. Its smell and its color are an embellishment of life, not a condition of it. It is only goodness which gives us extras, and so I say again that we have much to hope from the flowers." Holmes's brain, his intellect, is the only element of his character that's really necessary to the main plot of his stories. Detectives solve crimes. The rest of him, his many quirks and complexities, are, by his own admission, extra, a mere appendix. And as he says, it is only goodness which gives him these qualities. They color and embellish him, not merely functional, but lovely. He is an icon. He is that eternal character we've all seen countless times before, in countless incarnations. He is the brain, the crime-solving automaton, Those things stay the same over the course of all his stories. Unlike in so much media, we as readers aren't drawn in and compelled to read further by the changes he undergoes as a person along his journey, or compelled by the change in our own perspective as we watch him. By the secret dimensions within this apparently flat, iconic symbol of a character. His heart is a mystery left up to the audience to solve. And that, detective, is the most interesting investigation in the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. But it's not everything. There's another dimension to Holmes we didn't touch on here at all. Holmes is basically just his author, Arthur Conan Doyle. And boy, is that man interesting. As writers and creatives, I think we have a lot to learn from looking at how he lived his life, how he found the inspiration for his art, the surprising places from which he drew these, some of the most iconic of all tales. So, we made a whole video about it. It's actually part of a series we make outside of YouTube called Worldsmiths. We tend to focus more on the art than the artist here on Foundry. This show is really about encouraging you to go out and make your own art, to take the ideas and techniques of great artists and find new things to do with them. But Worldsmiths is where we peel back the pages and enter the world of the artist behind the art. See how and why they do the things that they do. You'll be surprised how much you learn about yourself in the process. We've already done a video on Clive Barker, and we've got plans to cover plenty of other authors and artists too, like Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman, Ursula K. Le Guin, and so much more. You can watch all of it over on our streaming platform, Nebula. If you're not familiar, Nebula is just a paradise for video creators. YouTube is kind of a crazy place to make content. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have this platform, but you have to be so careful about your topic choices, your packaging, what you include in your videos. You just start to feel like you're walking on eggshells. Nebula doesn't have any of those concerns. Nebula really takes care of its creators, making sure we have all the love and support we need to make what we really want to make. It's honestly so nice, because sometimes you just get tired of all the fuss. Sometimes you just want to be an artist. And Nebula lets us do that. And here's the really fun part, you can get Nebula for cheaper than almost any other streaming platform on the internet. Like less than $1.25 per month. That cheap. We want you to have access to Worldsmiths and all our other Nebula content, so we teamed up with another streaming platform called CuriosityStream, who will give you a whole year of Nebula for free when you sign up with them. So basically, 2 streaming services and an entire second Foundry show, Worldsmiths, for less than $1.25 a month. And I cannot say enough about how much I love CuriosityStream as its own platform. Quality documentaries are hard to find, but quality documentaries about the things I care about? Myths and monsters, literature, the madness of creative minds? Yes, this is where I want to be. CuriosityStream has documentaries about everything. It'll definitely get your imagination working. So, here's how to see our new show Worldsmiths, including that new episode about Arthur Conan Doyle, all of Nebula, and all of CuriosityStream for less than $1.25 per month. All you have to do is click the link in the description or go to curiositystream.com/Talefoundry and sign up for 1 year using the code Talefoundry. That's it. And that first year is only going to be $14.79, which again comes out to less than $1.25 per month. Frankly, I'm not quite sure how they can afford to do this for us, but I'm definitely not complaining. Seriously, take advantage of this offer while it's still going. I don't think any better one exists in the world of streaming. Once you do, come back and tell us what you think of our new show. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts. Anyway, that's all for this one. Keep your eyes peeled, stay curious, and as always, keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye.